Hey guys, good morning, buongiorno. This is Oren, of course, Game of Money. Wearing my sunglasses inside. Why? We're in a styly Milan in the Giorgetti showroom. This is amazing. Been in Italy, of course, for 10 days. We were first at Lake Garda and then in Bassano, where the factory is, Breton, and then in Venice for a couple of days of filming and touring around with investors. And now in the middle of Milan, in probably the one place in the world in which style and fashion exists harder, faster, and more intense than anywhere else in the world. So we've been situated here for a couple of days, meeting with partners, of course, for stone engineering quartz distribution. And we're here at Giorgetti, one of the largest designers and designers of living rooms, kitchens, homes around the world. So we're here for meetings. I thought I'd take a few minutes to talk about mass luxury, since we're here in the middle of where mass luxury actually happens. Okay, so I think the easiest way for you to understand the way I think about mass luxury is Rolex versus Richard Mille. Richard Mille is if you watch Formula One, all the Formula One racers have a Richard Mille watch. Of course, Rolex, is a watch brand and a luxury brand everybody is familiar with. So both of these watches in different ways have penetrated the mass market. If you walk around here, there's lots of luxury brands. You're like, there's 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 square foot store, that is richly appointed. And these stores must be 3, 4, 5 million euros to appoint and build out in TI. It's actually incredible. And you see brands you've never heard of. And you're like, how is that possible? Well, those aren't mass luxury. They have a small, core group of customers that they cultivate over years, and they in-sell. So those are not, they haven't broken through to the mass luxury. But if you look at Prada, Louis Vuitton, Richard Mille, Montclair, those are stores that are global. You might see them in Costa Mesa, you might see them in Los Angeles and San Francisco, also in Milan, also in Paris, and they've broken through, this very tough ceiling into mass luxury. And so there's very different approaches. Why am I talking about all this? Because of course, OK Stone, which is our large portfolio company, which, now we're going to be cresting through $50 million of capital into that deal, has got to do that same task. Break through into mass luxury. I think if you're a salesperson, if you're a small business person, if you are working through this problem, how to break through this sort of glass ceiling so everybody is aware of you, but you can also maintain, you don't have to go crazy Eddie where you say compete on price. And the easiest way to make mass awareness for what you're doing is obviously to compete on price. Low price, decent quality, sort of the American way. How do you maintain price function, quality function, and mass awareness? That is what they do. That's why we're here in Italy. That's why we work with it. That's what they do here better than anybody else. Nate was just saying, hey, when I walk in these stores, I immediately feel low status and want to buy something, whether it is at Burberry, whether it's at Prada, whether it's at Louis Vuitton, whether it's Ferrari, whether it's Rolex, whether it's Richard Mille, whether it's at Giorgetti. You walk in and you're like immediately desperate to buy something, no matter how small, just to show the store and the brand and the salespeople that you're legitimate. That's what they do here. It's absolutely incredible how they do it and the execution of that. So in the U.S., when you walk into Home Depot and somebody comes out wearing an orange vest, and you're like, where are the galvanized nails? You're not trying to make that guy think that you're capable of buying galvanized nails and you're in that strata of society. And where's the, the glue gun? Where can I get white gloss paint? And even if you're going to spend $5,000, right? Where's dishwashers and refrigerators? I don't know. I've spent $20,000 at Home Depot. You're not trying to make the people in the store catch up to their status. You're just looking for galvanized nails and paint and glue. And so that's sort of the American way, is lower the price, make it massively available, and make it up in volume. Here, exact opposite in some way. They still want the volume, but maintain the status, maintain the luxury pricing, but provide the accessibility. So the two use cases that I'm familiar with, to give you a sense of that, is as OK Stone and our company starts to enter that market, what does that look like? So if you think about Rolex, so Rolex changes very little year after year. The bands change, a little bit. The watch, but if you buy a Rolex, $25,000 Rolex today, that watch is going to be sellable for, as long as it's treated well and in good condition, adjusting for inflation. About the same as what you bought it for. So you bought it for $25,000, maybe you sell it for $22,000, 3, 4, 5 years from now, because they change so little. The product is not volatile at all. And that's an incredible accomplishment. And let's just call that for the moment old luxury. Right now, take a watch like Richard Mille, which all the Formula One drivers have, which is very popular with rap stars and celebrities and this kind of thing. So that watch sells on high design, right? So yes, last year's design is last year. That is gone, right? Next year they have a new colorway, a new ceramic, a new bezels, and so the watch is changing fundamentally year after year in order to be high attraction for popular culture and then drag you in, because the singer, the football player, the Formula One driver, the celebrity that you are have an affinity with is wearing that watch, right? And that attracts you to it. The price point is very exclusive. There's enormous scarcity, and it is a high status item. Rolex also a high status item, but the Richard Mille attracts you in because each year there's a new offering that is highly scarce, right? The issue with taking that approach to luxury is that very likely you buy a $350,000, $250,000 Richard Mille, because that colorway in a year or two is no longer in the popular sentiment, is no longer in the cultural colorways. If you look at CMYK, right? If you go to the fashion district in Los Angeles, Paris, or Manhattan, the colorways change every year, right? CMYK, issues like what's the hot color. So some years it's purple, some years it's yellow, some years it's pink. This year it's pink and blue. My son wants everything pink and blue. 3 years from now, we're all gonna be looking back and then laughing at pink and blue. So if you buy the Richard Mille pink and blue colorway this year, 3 years from now, that thing, your entry point was $350,000. Now you're at 125 or 150 because that colorway is passé. Rolex doesn't have colorways like that. They're very consistent luxury. Now they don't have a $350,000 price point. They have a $18,000 to $25,000, maybe high end $35,000 price point. Mass luxury is very tricky. If you approach it from very, very high style, what is the colorway? Who is the celebrity of the moment? So your buyers, can't put that back into the market, get some capital back, and then get your new offering, right? So that's what happened with the Richard Mille. Rolex, you can enter a Rolex, keep it for 10 years, re-enter the market, recover quite a lot, and just stay in mass luxury. So as we move into stone luxury, there's no secondary market for stone. You're not going to have an installed countertop and be able, so we have to make these choices about entry price points. But I think the colorways and the richness of the design is going to be some choices that we really have to make. We'll get the most amount of customers with the most amount of excitement, the most amount of celebrities, the most amount of TV views, the most amount of in-placement in movies with the highest Richard Mille style colorway of the moment, most attractive to get the highest price. We don't have to deal with resale value again in construction, right? So we got to either choose that position, or we have to choose an entry point, which is, from a design standpoint, much more stable. It's going to be lower price, but more mass market. So I definitely encourage you to think about, in your own business, this is the way to think about it. The American way drives price to the bottom as a commodity. The European way looks to maintain high status and price as a maximum. These two ways are incompatible. I'll give you an example. As we're dealing with what design ways are actually going to work, and we start to design the surfaces and the countertops and material science for the American market, what we're learning is whatever you design for the American market cannot be sold in the European market. It's too flashy. We, in the United States, we live our lives inside the kitchen. We want dynamic looking surfaces in our kitchens because where our kids are, it's where the laptops are, it's where backpacks are, it's where dad is doing work, it's where mom is cooking or dad is cooking and mom is doing work, whatever. Let's not get into that topic too deeply. But everything is happening in and around the kitchen, maybe leaking a little bit into the living room or that kind of thing. In Europe, kitchens are much smaller, and the kitchen is where food is being served. And in the United States, the kitchen is where life is being lived. That's a distinction. So we cannot, and this is a perfect example of design, we cannot design a line for the US market and the European market. Multiculturalism, globalism, global markets don't work in that effect. It might work for an iPhone, might work for a Dell computer, a MacBook, or Scotch tape. You can have global markets. But for design, Europe, Asia, and the United States are very distinctive from each other. You cannot sell products designed for the U.S. consumer into Europe, which is fine. U.S. consumer is the most cashed up consumer in the world. $13 trillion consumer. We don't need to build a business in the United States and Europe. There's enough business for us in the United States. But it's a very specific design entry point. So on that, if you're in the U.S. market, building a brand, building products, just be aware of the pull to race to the bottom of price, compete on volume, right, and try and get specific accounts to hold margin. That is not the European way, right? The American companies just do not well understand the power of status from the brand. We understand price. We understand, a broad distribution. We understand, we were joking. We see so many deals. Somebody's opened one restaurant, right, and they got that to work, and they're like, I'm going to franchise it to 1,000 locations. You haven't got it to work at 3 locations yet. So everybody jumps in like, hey, I got it working here once. I'm going to lower the price. I'm going to spread it everywhere across the United States. That's the way we think in the United States, is how big and how fast can we go. So if you think of the American way, which is Buffalo Wild Wings, right, is have 2,500 locations across America. You've got a very inexpensive product, a very high margin, high operating costs. So low cost to the consumer, get it everywhere, and the founder's a billionaire. So that's the American way. Get it everywhere as quickly as possible. Very low cost to the consumer, very low status, very high brand recognition, low status, high brand recognition, low cost, high margin, and a very specific, palette and delivery on the value proposition, and but a low status brand, right? Very hard to bring those brands anywhere else. So Starbucks, don't find Starbucks here in Europe. Very specific to the American way. Don't find Buffalo Wild Wings, here in Europe. Very specific to the American way. So as you're building a brand and a product, even if you're a salesperson, you're an entrepreneur, you're building a small company. We just throw status in the United States to the wind. We just throw it away on day one, right? How can I go get corporatization, profitization, massivization, spreaditization, and low-costitization, and somehow become a billionaire by having so much of it? That, you can do that. That's a 30-year plan, right? Every company I see in the United States throws status just out the window on door one and races for price, value proposition, corporatization, and go publicization. That is a very difficult playbook because you're throwing away one of the key ingredients to having a brand, and that is status. Come to Europe, sit aside, not for a day or 2 days, or not hop around 10 different cities. Come to Milan, come to Paris, come to Florence, come to Venice, and see what they do to monetize status and brand, and how they approach brand, and see how interesting that is in your application to the business. So again, broadcasting here from the center of Milan, We're in the Giorgetti showroom. Got a couple meetings to go through today on the distribution of quartz. Somehow, because I finance the company, I'm also in charge of marketing in terms of marketing partnerships. That's what I'm doing here. Amazing trip, amazing meetings, and get a chance to see status and brand happening in real time in multi-billion-dollar companies. I would add, if you saw these tariffs come up, these 145% tariffs on China, and China, Nate and I were talking, retaliated. So they had these sort of Chinese small workshops getting on TikTok and saying, hey, Hermes is actually, a lot of the brand is made, here in a little workshop, artisanal workshop in China. So you don't really understand, you guys are slapping tariffs on China, and you've got this sort of proud consumerism, but the stuff you really covet in terms of status, quality, European aesthetic is actually made here in China. The reason I mention that is not the disclosure of it, but if you think about it, the way I think about it, so they tried to do a reveal on European status, and it really didn't stick that hard that some of the stuff is made in China. Because when you walk in the store, when you work with the salespeople, when the brand has an emotional nuance to it, a lifestyle appeal, whether it's made on the moon, on the dark side of Mars, in an artisanal shop in China, or in the outskirts of Milan, the consumer gets feeling from the brand, from the product. Like, what they know how to do is make the product convey value, price, emotion, and nuance in the product that feels amazing to the consumer. Don't throw that out the window for no reason. We're definitely not. We're talking about, so if you buy an engineered quartz slab that is sort of lab-grown slab countertop in the world, your pricing on that is going to be $500 at Home Depot, $1,500 to $2,500 from us. I don't think you could go much higher than $3,000, $3,500 in an engineered quartz stone slab. We're talking about how to get the first $50,000 stone slab for a consumer, maybe to you, in the world. How do we do that? Well, certainly brand, luxury, status, scarcity, availability, material science, and being able to evoke an emotion directly for the U.S. consumer. All right, so I don't want to interfere with Giorgetti's showroom and business anymore, so I'm going to wrap this up, take this into meetings upstairs, and we'll see you next time on The Game of Money.